So we are going to start right on the 2:30 mark. Welcome to the Abolitionist Vision and Intersection, or welcome to Abolitionist Visions and Intersections, a summit hosted by the American Library Association Social Responsibilities Roundtable, or SRRT. SRRT believes that libraries and librarians must center social responsibility by recognizing and helping to solve social problems and inequities for the common good. My name is Mia Brunner. I am so privileged to be here moderating this session. I am joined by Rachel Rosekind, who will be monitoring the chat, and Rebecca Black, who will be overseeing our Q&A. So just to start with some housekeeping, and I'm going to introduce our speakers after this. I want to start with some accessibility stuff. So captions, you can enable them by clicking more in the bottom right of the screen. Hold on, am I frozen? Okay.
A little bit.
Okay, am I good now?
You're good now.
Okay, so just to rewind captions, you can enable them by clicking more at the bottom right of the screen and then selecting show captions. We are going to continue recording. If anyone objects, please feel free to let us know. You can message Rachel, who is monitoring the chat, Rachel Rosekind, if you don't want to message the room broadly. We also wanted to go over some etiquette, so please keep cameras and mics off unless you are presenting. Also, be respectful and extend care and compassion to yourself and others. This includes using first-person language when you're posing questions or sharing information in the chat. That means refraining from using dehumanizing language like inmate, prisoner, convict, or ex-con, and instead using language that centers the personhood of the people we're talking about. So incarcerated person, justice involved individual, or justice impacted person, for example. We really do want to hear from you about all of the presentations scheduled today, so please don't hesitate to engage. You can pop your questions into the Q&A as presentations are rolling. You don't need to wait until they're over to do so. You can reserve the chat for tech issues, to share resources, and of course, to appreciate our wonderful, brilliant panelists. We hope to have time at the end, so I will keep it short, to circle back to the Q&A so our presenters can address your questions. So now for the good stuff. This session focuses on institutions, education, and intellectual engagement. Our first presenter is Arielle Rodriguez. Her pronouns are she, they. Arielle is the Humanities and Interdisciplinary Studies librarian at the University of Puget Sound, where she serves as the liaison librarian to students incarcerated at the Washington Correction Center for Women, or WCCW.
I'll just share my screen here. Oh, sorry. Hold on, I have to switch the view here to myself. Sorry. That should work better. Do you just see the slide presentation?
Yes, we can
Okay.
see you, hear you, see your, but we can see your notes actually.
Oh, okay. That's strange. Let's see. Okay, do you now just see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Hi everybody. My name is Arielle Rodriguez. I'm a first-year librarian at the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. As Mia said, I'm a interdisciplinary studies liaison librarian, and I'm the liaison librarian for incarcerated students at the Washington Correction Center for Women. And I'll be talking about my work with them today through a presentation I call Liaison Librarianship at WCCW Services and Struggles. Okay, just like a brief introduction here, so our outline. So I'll do an introduction of the Washington Correction Center for Women, or WCCW, Freedom Education Project, Puget Sound, or FEPPS, which is the program through which students at WCCW can obtain an associate's or a bachelor's degree. And then I'll talk about, give a little background about FEPPS students, the enrollment and courses. Then I'll talk about some struggles, barriers, and workarounds that we've come up with and I've come up with to provide services to the students, and then some outcomes and potential looking forward sorts of things. I do want to provide a note on language used. So regarding the use of the word woman, FEPPS and so FEPPS provides education for gender diverse students in WCCW. But I do use the term women in describing the history of FEPPS, and as well when I say the full name of WCCW, because woman is in there. This is the language that the original students who founded FEPPS used. So just to maintain continuity of history, I will be using that term when talking about the framework of how FEPPS was founded. I also refer to students who are incarcerated at WCCW in the associate's and bachelor's degree program as students or incarcerated students. They all have different preferences on how others refer to them in any given context. They see themselves as students when they're engaged with their studies, and that's how I see them, and that's how their professors see them. I'm also going to use this list of abbreviations and acronyms. If you need a reminder of what they mean, just you can stop me or I can review it at the end. And then I struggled between framing this as struggles or barriers. I think both are appropriate words to use here. Barriers are put in place by people and systems in power, but they elicit very real feelings of struggle that the students I serve have to overcome every day. Okay, so this is going to be a very brief history of FEPPS. So it doesn't like encompass the totality of all of the events and the very uphill battles faced by students to bring higher education into WCCW. And just based on the timeline, you can see it took about a decade to really get a lot of programs and accreditations off the ground. In 2008, a group of residents at WCCW created the Women's Village to create a space to promote community and positive change in their lives. A few years later, in 2011, the Education Council was created from the Women's Village. They invited professors from the area to talk through and create a plan about how to bring higher education to WCCW. And then shortly after, FEPPS was established. Early courses were not for credit, and they were taught by volunteers from colleges and universities all over the Puget Sound region. In 2014, Tacoma Community College, or TCC, began to accredit the courses, and students were able to earn an associate's degree that can be transferred directly to any four-year public institution in the state of Washington. And then in 2019, the Board of Trustees at UPS, which is where I work, unanimously agreed to accredit a BA in Liberal Studies. It's important to note that while UPS is a private institution and normally does not fall under a direct transfer agreement, the BA is designed to transfer into UPS. If the AA is designed to transfer it into the BA program at UPS. Classes started for a bit in January 2020, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, classes and many other programs were put on hold at WCCW, just like much of the rest of the country. And then classes resumed again in fall 2021. A bit about WCCW. It is located in Gig Harbor, Washington, so it's about 20 minutes from our campus over the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. It has capacity to hold 738 people, but due to the population's been declining due to some state laws changes, state Supreme Court decisions, resentencings, and the pandemic. More long-term stable count is likely closer to 500 people. WCCW also has 3 custody levels: low, medium, and close, or maximum as it's sometimes called. And students from all custody levels are enrolled in FEPPS courses. After a very challenging time during COVID pandemic restrictions were implemented, WCCW resumed in-person visitation on May 9th, 2021, which was Mother's Day that year. Okay. The AA program enrolled 35 new students at the start of fall 2023. These students are coming from various interactions with higher ed, with some having some exposure to just having, so some have had exposure to either taken some college classes, have an associate's degree already, and some have taken their GEDs. The BA students, there are 13 of them that have moved through this program as a core cohort. They also have different initial exposure to higher education, some already having an associate's degree when they became incarcerated, and then some obtaining their associates through WCCW and TCC. The BA through UPS is designed to be completed in 3 years. And like I said before, while not a public institution, the program is designed so that AA that they are getting from TCC is transferable to UPS. The students we serve come from very diverse backgrounds and lived experiences. I've outlined a few on the slide, but in addition to these, students also have very different backgrounds regarding how they previously interacted with educational systems. And for some, being in school has sometimes exacerbated their traumas and anxiety. So we're really thankful that the students do put this kind of trust in us and allow us into the space that they're in to bring classes and resources to them. They're having to navigate multiple identities and navigate the norms of being a student and being an incarcerated person. And often us, meaning the people involved in their education, their family and their friends are sometimes the only people who might see them as students first. So they're always having to contend with being othered in their space. These are some offerings of last semester's courses and current courses. So the courses are designed to mirror on-campus courses and structures as much as possible. Including non-accredited courses, there have been over 90 unique course offerings, including the things up on the screen: primatology, political theory, Spanish and German, sociology, different sociology classes, creative writing, yoga, and more. So now that I got some background out of the way, I want to highlight some of the barriers in place and struggles felt by students and myself as a result, as their librarian. Students are at a very increased risk of having classes canceled for any number of reasons, and we are basically totally at the whim of the DOC. While we have to make a lot of compromises and there are some points where agreement is made, we are in the facility because the DOC allows us to be there. So we often have to comply with whatever interpretation of some rule that they have on any given day. This is the reality, of course, that the students face also, even outside of their studies, right? They're constantly surveilled, monitored, and have to deal with these interpretations of daily rules. A more recent development that we found out about in the last couple weeks was that the DOC is canceling their 20-year contract with TCC. They are taking proposals from different schools to take their place, but it's unclear if there are community colleges that have capacity to take their place. There do seem to be, at least right now, two hopeful candidates that we're hoping will, one will get approved and implemented within the next 2 years, it looks like is the timeline. Another barrier and struggle that arises is that I don't have direct access to communicate with any of the FEPPS students. So I have to rely very heavily on intermediaries by sending them emails and then following up with emails. And so this to me and to others is like obviously a very big equity issue, since on-campus students can basically just drop in to my office if I'm available to have a reference or research consultation. They can also reach me by phone, chat, and email, right, which the students in FEPPS can't do. This causes delays in getting students materials and results in what I consider to be fuzzy and potentially unresolved research and reference consultations. I don't know until much later, after I've been able to find and provide them with resources, whether or not it's what they needed, right? Many of our students also work jobs, and that can sometimes lead to them missing study halls, which serves as like a secondary sort of space where they can get help. The biggest barrier and struggle that I think I've identified, and that I believe others in the program would agree with me about, is the students working within this digital divide. WCCW is considered off network. So classrooms have limited access to whitelisted sites. The students themselves do not have direct access to the internet. So instructors can show a YouTube video, for example, but they have to notify WCCW beforehand. They also have to, any slide reels or presentations that you want to have shown in class have to be added to this DOC USB port like 2 weeks before the class they'll be using. So it's a lot of pre-planning. So it makes it hard when unexpected things arise. Students in the BA program are issued laptops with offline instances of JSTOR, Canvas, and Microsoft Word. They are very limited in what they can search for, and they can only access abstracts and titles of articles. They have to request that those articles then be printed off so they can see if it's something that they want to use. While the students technically have the ability to check out books from UPS and TCC, they can't do their own search in library catalogs because they, again, don't have any internet access on these laptops. This removes their independent ability to make decisions about what books, articles, and media they might think is relevant to their research or just sparks their intellectual needs and interests. The information literacy sessions also have to look different. There's a higher variability in the types of technology students have interacted with. Some students have never used a cell phone, for example. So we have to work to radically rethink how we import information literacy concepts and try to adapt them into this no tech environment where students have varying degrees of exposure to technology prior. And this causes students to miss out on what I consider critical hands-on research and resource discernment skills. A more recent development that we're kind of dealing with is that their laptops were confiscated by the DOC due to an outside security issue. Our technology coordinator was able to back up their saved work, but we have no clear timeline of when they will get more secure laptops back, but maybe May. They can currently use the ones they have, but only in their study halls. Like I said before, some students can't always attend those. There are questions why the laptops were confiscated, since the type of security threat that occurred was enacted by an outsider and it can't be replicated in a prison environment. So to a lot of us, the confiscation is an overreaction. But no matter the barrier and the struggle that surfaces, we have some workarounds implemented. UPS students can be peer researchers through an experiential learning course that focuses on education and incarceration. I trained those students to be peer research, to do peer research consultations in the context of incarceration. And I've compiled materials that they can share with their peers and resources that they can get outside of WCCW to help their classmates find things. I really tried to hammer the point home that even though their peers are incarcerated, they are granted the same level of intellectual and academic freedom and an expectation of privacy that a student on campus would have. I've also updated this inherited reference form to try and streamline student requests better and to help try to prompt them provide more concise requests. I go into their classrooms and try to discuss information literacy concepts the best I can given the lack of technology. I also use these visits as opportunities to recommend books that they can request either through their librarian or solicit requests they have for me. I'm working on building information literacy course packets for both the AA and BA students. And I'm not a lawyer and I'm not examining the legality of my practices, but I've taken what I call full advantage of these fair use gray areas, especially with films. A lot of times the professors like to show films in study halls, but again, students can't always see them. So prior to getting the laptops confiscated, we were copying them and uploading them to this offline Canvas instance. Now that the laptops are confiscated, and they unclear if that'll be something that we need to keep doing, or can realistically keep doing. But there are some really great outcomes and things to look forward to. FEPPS has graduated 76 associate's degree students since 2016. And some of those graduates have transferred into public four-year institutions such as the University of Washington. We've had one BA student who was released join us on campuses here at UPS, and she'll be graduating in May 2024. Our BA cohort will be graduating on June 1st, 2024. We were able to have, so Roxanne Gay will join us via Zoom, and Dr. Kelly Lytle Hernandez from UCLA will join us in person. These are two of the three speakers students really wanted to come talk at their graduation, so they'll be really excited when they find out that these two speakers will be there. The next cohort will not start until fall 2025 as UPS and the DOC hammer out a plan that will be approved by the Department of Education so students can use their Pell Grants for tuition. I don't want to give the DOC a ton of credit here since they did cancel this 20-year contract and confiscate laptops, but they're wanting to take proposals, at least from area community colleges, seems to indicate some baseline support for continuing presence of FEPPS in higher education at WCCW. I'm also going to be working on a proposal to the DOC to advocate for increased technology access and potentially whitelisting websites that could benefit the students, such as the UPS library website. So like I said, I'm a first-year librarian, so I'm doing a lot of this work by trial and error and independent research. I don't have a lot of mentorship or guidance for this role, and the previous librarian didn't leave a ton of information for me about this space that I'm navigating with the students. So it's kind of been a baptism by fire. But if you have any ideas or just that you'd like to share or just interested in how things pan out, please don't hesitate to be in touch. And thanks for listening to me today.
Thank you. I'm like, that sounds like incredible work to me. Um, but okay, please, I feel like I have so many questions. Please put questions in the Q&A. Again, we'll circle back to them. But next, we have Marta Brunner. This we share, well, similar last name. Marta's pronouns are she, her. Marta is the college librarian at Skidmore College in Saratoga Springs, New York.
Unmute. All right. I am trusting that you are seeing my slides, and I am just going to dive in. Thank you. It's such a privilege to participate in this amazing summit, and I can't wait for all of the presentations to come and tomorrow as well. So as Mia said, I'm Marta Brunner. I'm the library director at Skidmore. We're a predominantly white small liberal arts college in upstate New York. And since I joined Skidmore in 2015, I have very occasionally received reference letters by mail from people behind bars. And at first, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't know if I was allowed to respond. But through conversations with other library directors at schools with prison education programs especially, I came to see these letter writers as patrons. And so about the same time, as I was exploring the question about responding to letters, I learned of the Prison Library Support Network, and I began volunteering in their reference by mail service. So right away, I realized how potent a learning opportunity prison reference would be for undergraduate students at an institution like ours. I happen to be a faculty member as a librarian here. And I created a unit in my existing 3-credit course on libraries and social justice. And one thing that makes this kind of learning opportunity especially potent is that it enables one to confront the ways in which our own institutions reinforce incarceration, systems of incarceration in various ways. So for example, excluding incarcerated people from our definition of patrons, or for myself, recognizing that our college president's racial justice initiative, which has done many great things, could be mobilized to fund investments designed to confront the impacts of mass incarceration, particularly for members of our own community, students, staff, faculty, who have been impacted by the prison industrial complex themselves. And we used to have a prison education program here that ended long enough ago that most people are unaware of it, except for those who are directly involved. So at any rate, participating in the prison reference service and teaching about it made me see opportunities for meaningful structural change on our campus, and that's what I really cared about. So I created a 2-week unit in my course, as I said, but you know, 2 weeks in a single course can't make an impact on the institution. I am in the process of creating a standalone course that focuses on the information needs of incarcerated people, that centers on prison reference by mail. But here again, my sense is that a single course remains a silo, and a handful of students will certainly be impacted, but the institution chugs on unchanged. So the real promise for systemic change in my mind has lain in the racial justice learning community model that we have here on campus. Before I talk about how I've connected this with prison abolition, I wanted to provide a bit of context. So in 2021, Skidmore applied for and received a Mellon Foundation grant for Africana Studies in the Humanities at Skidmore. And these grant-funded activities included two-year postdoctoral fellows in Black Studies, Racial Justice Teaching Challenge, which was aimed at faculty to get them to either revamp existing courses or create new courses in Black Studies or related to anti-racist pedagogies, summer student faculty research funding, and faculty staff learning communities. And that's what I really want to talk about here. And all of these initiatives together were aimed at developing new courses for the Black Studies program, but also seeding anti-racist and Black feminist pedagogies throughout the curriculum. And the overall goal was to, and I'm quoting here from the grant proposal, profoundly alter the culture and climate at Skidmore, creating positive changes with long-lasting impacts. So the learning communities grew out of the concern that just drumming up a greater number of courses wouldn't ensure that those courses would be taught well. And the steering committee worried that teaching, especially by white professors like myself, who may have insufficient background or training in Black studies or anti-racist pedagogies, might end up being merely performative or, at worst, do actual harm. So the learning communities were designed to create a learning environment in which campus staff and faculty together, both tenure track and non-tenure track faculty, could engage in personal and professional growth that leads to changes in the ways that each participant approaches their work, whatever that is, at Skidmore, whether that's in the classroom, in student support offices, in fundraising and alumni relations, in the library or elsewhere on campus. And I just want to show you this map. I don't expect you to be able to see which building is which, but this just should give you a sense of the breadth of campus that has been impacted by this learning community model over the past 5 semesters. The green happy faces are staff and the yellow happy faces are faculty. And I think importantly, all learning community facilitators and participants are compensated for their labor through the grant funds. Although participants need to apply, the only criteria for being approved, besides space in the learning community, are an expressed desire to learn about the topic of the particular learning community, and the topics have been myriad. It's not about existing experience or expertise. And the intention should be that the participant will apply their learning somehow. So they have to upfront enter into this learning community saying, yeah, I'm learning because I want to be able to proceed forward differently from here. So the learning communities are deliberately framed as co-exploration rather than as a seminar or a reading group. So they're led through facilitation rather than teaching. And those of us who facilitate focus on the learning experience rather than particular deliverables, like writing a paper or something like that. And this framing creates the conditions for disrupting traditional academic hierarchies, which opens up possibilities for rethinking the ways that we work together on a college campus. And we launched these learning communities in spring of 2022, and we're now in our 5th semester, as I think I said. So I am facilitating a learning community right now, and you can see the title, Libraries, Incarceration, and the Humanizing Power of Information. And the participants include hourly and salaried staff. They come from the library, the art museum, and the Career Development Center, as well as our documentary studies program. And in terms of faculty participants, we have both tenured and non-tenure track faculty, including full and part-time faculty. And these folks come from the library, Black Studies, the music department, and the documentary studies program. So that's 6 departments and programs in one learning community. And in between meetings, each participant explores a topic that interests them relating to libraries, incarceration, the prison industrial complex, and information access. And I've encouraged each participant to look for primary sources whenever possible. And then when we meet, everyone brings those individual explorations into our group conversations. And in the first half of the semester, I offered key framing questions each week so that we'd have a common thread to bind together our individual explorations. So I've posted on the slides here a couple examples. You know, is information access a human right, or is it a privilege that you can lose if you do something wrong? So, for example, some of the participants in my learning community were interested in comparative perspectives on incarceration. So looking at how incarceration happens and is thought about in other countries, and bringing that perspective, what they learn, to bear on these questions about information access and whether it's a human right. Other participants are interested in learning more about historical practices such as redlining that disadvantaged communities of color. I have a couple who are interested in queer and trans experiences of incarceration. And one individual is specifically interested in what we know about what goes on inside prisons and how we know those things, whether that's data, whether that's personal testimony, and so on. So starting this week, we just finished spring break. We'll be learning how to answer prison reference letters through the PLSN reference by mail service. So I will be training them this week, and then in subsequent weeks, we'll be answering real letters that are in the queue. And then we'll close the semester with individual reflections on how each of us will apply what we've learned, both personally and professionally. So I want to close with a few key insights. The beauty of the learning community model is that it's specifically aimed at building the critical mass needed to effect structural change on our campus. And as one of the Mellon Grant Steering Committee members put it, we're trying to get more of campus pulling in the same direction. That's hard. And the fact that we've had staff participation and have emphasized co-learning over expertise has really helped to confront faculty privilege and disrupt the typical academic dynamics that tend to amplify certain voices and silence others. And in fact, the learning community environment has created the conditions in which faculty, especially tenured ones, have been able to embrace their own need for growth with some measure of humility. And non-tenure track faculty participants have been able to access a scholarly community that they haven't always had access to, especially if they're carrying heavy teaching loads. And in my conversations with the Mellon Grant Steering Committee, we've agreed that one of the most fruitful outcomes has been the impact on staff participation. What we found is that staff can see change on a broader scale because they work outside the classroom, and thereby they amplify what's happening inside the classroom, so across the curriculum. And I'm currently working with several students, they're interns working with me on interviewing staff learning community participants, people who've participated over the past 5 semesters. And we're trying to use these interviews to determine the extent and nature of the impacts that staff participation have had on our campus. So these staff, as I mentioned earlier, they work in all areas, delivering services, implementing policies, supervising student workers, providing infrastructure that enables our curriculum to happen at all, doing assessment that ensures we can be accredited, like they're placed on campus. And I can offer 2 brief examples that I'm aware of these staff impacts. So one comes from my own team. I am aware of a library staff member who was not in my learning community, who I see speaks up more regularly in all library meetings to raise DEI related concerns. And in all library meetings, we have librarians are faculty, so we feel that faculty staff divide within our own team. Another example is a campus communications staff member who is participant in a learning community that I facilitated back in 2022. And this individual is better informed about the ways that race inflects our college archives, which he draws upon regularly for the stories about Skidmore that he puts out into the world. So those are 2 tangible examples of the kinds of impacts that are proliferating. So in other settings, the learning community model holds similar promise, I think. Transcending hierarchies of privilege and fostering the kinds of learning that enables a community or an organization to pull in the same direction. And here I have to give a shout out to PLSN's Abolitionist Futures discussion group, which strikes me as a similar kind of learning environment. And unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts, I haven't been able to participate in this group. So if somebody is on here, and I'm sure there are people on in the seminar here the summit here who have participated, please give your impressions in the chat. So as I close, I just want to say that the crucial question for our campus will be what happens once our Mellon Grant ends. And the learning communities don't actually cost much, if anything, if you aren't paying people. But here at Skidmore, the compensation that facilitators and participants have gotten has ensured equitable access to the learning communities and equitable experiences for all involved. And it's really underlined the importance of the labor that's involved in learning. So with that, I will stop and I welcome your questions.
Thank you. Okay, just getting all my notes. So finally, we have Elise Seltzer. Elise's pronouns are she, her. Elise is the director of the middle and upper school library, supervisor of pre-K through 12th library programs, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging curriculum liaison at Brunner and May School in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts.
Thank you. So hi, I'm Elise Seltzer, she, her, hers pronouns. I'm an African-American woman with brown skin, close to the shade of a crayon, and I'm currently, as is often, wearing my hair in twist with purple. I'm, as was said, a school librarian by profession, and it is also a deep part of my identity. I'm also currently a PhD student at UMass Boston in the Urban Education Leadership and Policy program, focusing on research that centers providing identity-affirming curriculum and instructional practices. As an assignment that I had last semester, we looked at backstories of something in education, and I chose to focus on researching the backstory of the US/Western literary canon. As I was researching, I learned about the Great Works movement, which I had not previously known about. And today I will be presenting my observations on the program and wonderings about ways in which we could tweak it for abolitionist education in library settings. So I'm not by any means an expert on the Great Works movement or Great Books program or their implementation, nor am I an expert on libraries outside of schools, but based off of the awesome presentations that I've already heard today, I know that there are people here who might get some ideas and have the means to implement programming if something I say kind of sparks an idea that could start a path towards building community learning in this way. So the history. Post-World War II in 1945, Chicago University professors Robert Maynard Hutchins and Mortimer Adler conceived of an idea that the masses could gain a liberal education by reading great books, as they called them, with the desire was to have access to learning, and the thought that the average person would have the ability to access these works. They piloted the program first in public libraries, knowing that if it was to succeed, it needed to be able to go beyond their Chicago University. And the fact that they started there, I think this speaks to the power that libraries have for liberated education. The US educational system has deep roots in racism and inequity that it struggles to find its way out of. And sometimes, especially today with the rise of book bannings and attacks on DEI, I'm not convinced that there is even the desire to improve education for all students. For myself as a child, I was a very active reader. My mom has no idea how I did it, but she says I taught myself how to read. I excelled in my early elementary years, but starting in 3rd grade, I was in a predominantly white, very wealthy school system and told I could not go into the advanced reading book group or the higher level English classes. This was frustrating, but I didn't let it slow me down because I had my libraries. I stayed after school in the library until it closed. On the weekends, I would walk over to the town library, ready to stay all day. In high school, when the town library was being renovated, I took the train down to the main city library. At the libraries, I could read whatever I wanted, limited only by what I could carry. And even one summer, I decided to do a free choice extra credit report on black holes based completely on what I checked out from the library that summer. So libraries allowed me to educate myself beyond the racist school track that was provided for me. And part of why I wanted to become a librarian was so that I could offer that to others as well. So in the great works, I'm gonna show a picture of it and share screen. This is whoops. So this is the Great Works as it looked when it was first published. Britannica published all of the works included inside it. So they published this in 1954. The set was published, and just playing around with screen setting. And then, so, sorry. So it opens with an explanation from Hutchins about what he wanted to do with it, and it's called The Great Conversation. And in it, he quote insists that the democratic ideal is an equal opportunity for full human development, and since the liberal arts are the basic means of such development, devotion to democracy naturally results from devotion to them. In 1947, Hutchins and his teammate Adler launched the Great Books Foundation, a nonprofit educational foundation. Hutchins saw the Great Books as creating a community understanding for the entire world, which would protect people from future world wars. Hutchins felt deeply about the books on his list, which included works covering all subjects, starting with Homer and going up to the 20th century. And I can show you. Am I still sharing screen?
Not that I can see.
Okay. I will, okay. Share screen. So this is, it's a little. This is kind of the first page of the table of contents. And there's actually, their first version had 50, their first version had 54 chapters, no mention of female authors. The second edition had 58 chapters, and there were 2 women authors, Jane Austen and Willa Cather. So in The Great Conversation, Hutchins writes that the current list was of the moment, and he believed that it was what the generation needed at that time. He knew that there would be books that could be added and books that would be dropped off. He said, a great book is one that has endured the test of time and the common man views as a masterpiece. A great work is a book that by reading and understanding will provide judgment to other books. The Great Works was an attempt to increase access to learning, and this would eventually take hold in colleges throughout different courses, but they started the pilot in public libraries, providing free education to any adult who wanted it. As Great Works programs moved into college liberal arts programs, the instructors for these classes did not need to be able to offer additional information for the book. Rather, they facilitated conversations on how the book connected to the reader's life in that moment. So this, I believe, is the true test of an enduring great work. If a diverse community of readers from all walks of life can come together and have reflections on connections to their life today, then that's a great book. As a school librarian, this is my goal for the media used in classes, and I particularly aim for those connections to be positive and affirming ones. The idea of all students having this access is in fact what Adler and Hutchins originally had in mind, although they began with a small select group. And not only did they want great books to be a requirement for all University of Chicago undergrads, but throughout their careers, they spoke in favor of democratizing education and providing strong liberal education, including reading great books for the masses. Hutchins estimated that about 2/3 of young people were capable of this sort of learning, with the other 1/3 not being book learners in general. And he believed they should carry it seriously from the ages of 16 through 20, pushing for the program to move downward even to 10th grade through 12th grade into high school levels. And his list would actually go on to resemble what many college lists look like today. And I think if schools, colleges, and universities could accept Great Works programs as a part of an advanced degree, then the libraries have resources available for free. I'm thinking maybe we could incorporate these programs through libraries and not simply through colleges, which have prohibitive costs these days. And also have access to those who don't have access to high school or college spaces. In terms of access, one of the benefits of these more classic works as resources is that they are financially cheap to access. They exist in major electronic text collections such as Project Gutenberg, the Perseus Project, Project Bartleby, and there are others that provide complete text of the standard works found on the Great Books reading list. And connections are available to secondary sources such as encyclopedias and works of art and music. Assistance in locating these materials are available at college libraries and most public libraries. And websites also offer links through many of the Great Books programs offer reference links, which provide direct links specifically to these Great Books related materials. But I do think it is important that we broaden what we consider a great book, which I'll talk more about in a moment. But because of that, I think it's important that we work to support access to a wider range of books online. Right now in Massachusetts, which is where I'm at, is working on legislation to protect and increase access to digital books and protect and support libraries and librarians from book bannings. The Boston Public Library has joined the New York Public Library with the Books Unbanned e-card, which supports the rights of teens nationwide to read what they like without censorship. So teens can get a Boston e-card and have access to BPL's collection of frequently challenged and banned ebooks and e-audiobooks. So the thought and sentiment of Hutchins was good, but the problem was that he failed to see how his own white male upper class privilege was shaping his thoughts on what is considered a great book. For example, from his great conversation, there was so much talk of mankind and men that it was no surprise to me when the original lineup included no female authors. He was unable to see how his own cultural capital played a role in his choices. And then moving forward, Harold Bloom was a great admirer of Hutchins and Adler, and he has written an extensive amount of literary criticism. And after World War II, at the time that this was all being made, it became those who wrote literary criticism who kind of got to define the canon. When I tell my high school colleagues I'm researching the canon, they always bring up Bloom. And we have the database for literary criticism named after Bloom. Unfortunately, Bloom was a white male upper class man who was revolting against multiculturalism. Bloom's Western canon introduction reads as a final attempt to fight against various social justice movements. In the introduction, he writes, quote, "Originality becomes a literary equivalent of such terms as individual enterprise, self-reliance, and competition, which do not gladden the hearts of feminists, Afrocentrists, Marxists, Foucault-inspired new historiists, or deconstructors, all of these whom I have described as members of the school of resentment," end quote. So Bloom believed that the authors he categorizes as canon have endured because of their skill and originality, and he was unable to recognize the role that whiteness, maleness, and financial stability on their part and his played in what he considered to be canon. educators today must not hold so fast to what that is no longer reflect with accuracy the truth of the world today. So Hutchins bucked at the thought of a student being able to choose not to read Shakespeare, while I buck at the thought of an adult person not knowing the works of Octavia Butler, prophetess. The problem is, though, who gets to decide? Are those who decide truly representative and advocates of the truth of the country and the world and what our students need? I think we should work to let the students decide and guide them towards classics which could inform their learning. Hutchins said, quote, "It is the task of every generation to reassess the tradition in which it lives, to discard what it cannot use, and to bring into context with the distant and intermediate past the most recent contributions," end quote. So even those who helped establish the canon were clear that it was never meant to remain static. So I think a change in the books that are considered great works could increase in interest, which would increase academic success in their use. And there's also a need to reimagine what is valued in consideration today as higher academic pursuits. And I hope that this has given you something to think about in terms of ways in which we can increase educational opportunities for all through a library setting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Those were 3 inspiring presentations. We have a few minutes for Q&A before the next presentation, and it looks like there are 2 questions waiting in the chat. So while we start with these first 2 questions, if people want to put others, I'm sorry, not in the chat, in the Q&A feed, please put your questions in the Q&A. Yes, phenomenal and complimentary work. But okay, so to start with the first question, is there an issue with getting books to students?
For me, no. I'm really fortunate that I was told when I went to training, if it pertains to their academics, it's whatever, I can bring whatever I want to them. That being said, so students can check books out, and I've checked books out on behalf of students and had them, I've either brought them or had them brought to them at WCCW. But I can bring basically whatever material I want, as long as it's for school, right? So I view that as broad, right? Because their intellectual and academic interests are very broad. That's like tomorrow I'm going to their first sort of bridge course it's prior to their capstone. And since their laptops were confiscated, I'm now gonna have to bring a bunch of physical books with me, instead, because I can't use the laptops in class. They do not, I can't leave them with them though. So it's not like I'm donating the books. That's a separate process. But they can check things out. So like if there's something though that they want tomorrow, I'll have to take it back with me, have it checked out, and then bring it either back to them or have somebody bring it in on a day if I'm not available. So there is that kind of delay.
Okay, and one more question for you, which is, are there kinds of support that you wish you had in your role from your library, from peers, from just librarians in the field?
Yeah. So without getting too much into the culture and politics of my current campus, this is my first librarian job. I just graduated. And right before I left, there were job cuts and a very mass exodus from more seasoned librarians. And we also don't have a director right now. So my boss is the interim director and also the associate director of public services. So, and then in addition to that is on different committees. So when I started, it was me, her, and another librarian. That librarian eventually did leave. So of the 5 liaison librarian positions that now exist, 3 of us are brand new librarians. So I don't really have, and like I said before, I didn't really get a lot of information left behind from the former FEPPS librarian. And I did typed a question about having other academic responsibilities. I do. I'm a liaison to 10 disciplines on campus plus the FEPPS librarianship. So I basically I'm doing two librarian jobs now because they cut all the positions. So there's a lot of things I could say that would turn this into like a very political kind of rant. My peers are really great, and I know I can lean on them if I need things, particularly in subject areas I'm not entirely comfortable in. But outside of that, just not having like any sort of real guidance or mentorship and having to kind of figure it out all while kind of dealing with this weird faculty staff divide that exists on the campus has been challenging. I don't know if that answered that question. I could go on about this for like all day, so I'm not going to do that to anybody.
I think that was a great answer. Sounds like it's like there are multitudes. Okay. So are there any last questions for our 3 phenomenal presenters? Okay, well, thank you all so much. Up next is Designing for Yes in a World of No. That is going to start at 2:45 Central Time. I will share the waiting slide, but thank you all so much. Thank you to the presenters. Thank you to everybody in the chat, just for like this wonderful abolitionist community.